New York's power grid is getting an upgrade, and it's expected to save the state millions of dollars, as well as improve service. The New York Independent System Operator unveiled details yesterday about the $74 million smart grid project. That includes a new power control center in Rensselaer County, and other upgrades around the state will improve the way that electricity is transmitted. The smart grid is expected to help avoid blackouts and also lead to lower rates for customers. This all sounds fantastic. Here to explain more is NYSO spokesman Tom Rumsey. This is great news.
It's great to be back.
I have no idea what it means.
Well, hopefully that's not two of us tonight then, huh?
Yeah, indeed. Give us the overview.
All right, the overview is this. As you said, this is great. We were honored to have Senator Schumer and Congressman Tonko help announce this $74 million project that's going to help us do two of our key functions, which is, continue to drive a more reliable transmission grid for New York State, as well as increase the efficiency to lower cost to consumers.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, and let me tell you how that's going to work a little bit, because smart grid's a very topical word right now, and no one really
sounds like robots are going to be running.
That's right. That's right. For us, it's really two pieces of equipment we're going to put out there. One is going to help us really monitor the grid real time. So if you remember the blackout in 03,
I do.
The belief was, had these pieces of equipment been on the grid at that time, we may have been able to avoid the blackout moving from Ohio all the way to the East Coast.
It was a surge, right?
It was a surge. Yeah. Literally what happened was a branch fell on some wires in Ohio.
Right.
And the voltages got out of whack, and no one really had the visibility into the grid, much like an EKG. If you don't see it, you don't know about it until it's too late.
So, ostensibly, you would be able, with this kind of technology, to shut down an area and prevent that surge from coming in.
That's correct.
State?
See, what happens when the voltage gets out of whack is generators will shut down to protect themselves.
Right.
And so by the time that hit the New York system, we had literally 2 to 3 seconds to respond. This built up over time, so we would have been able to see the separation in voltage, if you will, and allowed us to make the corrections before it would have affected our system.
It seems like we should have known this. I mean, we should have been able to do this before, but the electric grid is actually very complicated.
It is very complicated.
And built in stages, right? So some pieces are older than other pieces, which must be challenging.
It is very challenging, and also you haven't had the overall command and control of the grid. We run the grid for New York State, but you've got ISO New England, a similar organization to ours that runs a number of states for them. So you don't have the command and control nationally that necessarily from the beginning. You've got regulations now that are mandatory, that at one time reliability that was mandatory now at one time was voluntary. So it's maturing some in its control and in its growth. And then the other one is the capacitors. They're going to actually help us save money. When you move electricity long distances, you lose it over time.
Right.
What this is going to do is allow more of that electricity to transfer. So lower costs. Instead of buying 12 to get 10, you can buy 11 to get 10.
So what's the percentage that you're going to be able to cut down of the loss?
Well, the easiest terms for consumers to understand is it's around $10 million a year in savings.
Yeah, that's not bad.
That's not bad.
What's amazing to me about, everybody understands, okay, so the system is overtaxed and that causes brownouts or blackouts, or the system gets hit by lightning and fried in some place. But then things like a branch or a squirrel in a transmitter, I mean, this kind of stuff seems too old school, but actually it really does happen, and it's just pretty basic things that you can't control.
Well, the good news is it's less likely to happen today than it was then because of the attention it's getting and the modernization of the grid. Competitive markets have done an amazing job of bringing in the attention and the technology and the improvements. 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago, we had what would have been an all-time peak load for New York State had it not been for some demand response, which I know is your favorite topic from last time. It would have been a record load, but we were able to call some of that. And across the entire state of New York, only one generator was unavailable.
Wow.
So they were all there ready to put, and only one transmission line. Competitive markets drive that.
What does that mean in terms of, it would have been a peak load, what would that number have been?
That number would have been a little over 35,000 megawatts, and what it was just under 34,000 megawatts. The all-time peak, let me check just to make sure so the guys back in the office don't yell at me, was 33.9. So it would have exceeded it had not the demand response helped us shave that peak.
And this was at the heat of the top of that heat wave?
That was on the 22nd of July.
And it was in the 90s, and people were very...
Yes.
When you were asking, I have to ask this question, viewers, I've always been skeptical. I have an air conditioner. Actually, it's the first time in many years that I have it, and I'm very glad that it exists.
It's a good time to get one.
However, when an elected official, like a mayor, says to folks in a city, please, everybody, turn down your air conditioner 3 degrees.
Yeah.
Does that actually work?
You know, it does work, but that's not the program we're talking about. We are required to maintain the reliability, so ours has to be a little more hardwired.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
And as we talked last time, we have over 4,200 people or customers in the state, large end users, Alcoas, the ski slopes, you name it. Those that use a lot of electricity are contractually obligated with us. They volunteer for the programs and they get compensated for capacity.
Right.
And then we alert them a day prior, and when necessary, we can ask them to reduce their load. And then we validate the fact they've done that. We got a little over 1,400 megawatts in the peak of the heat wave last week, which is incredibly more cost effective. Are
you starting to breathe a little easier now that we're coming around the bend toward the end of August?
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is the heat wave last time wasn't just New York. It was regional, and so it really taxed us all the way down to Texas. And so when you have that large of a heat wave, you're not able to shoulder as much on your neighbors or them on us. It isn't just upstate, downstate. You know, New York City's half the load, so when that uses a lot of power, and then the upstate has as high a power, that's when you start really having to balance the system.
Yeah. How much are you guys planning for Indian Point and the potential closure, which is obviously a priority for the governor?
Yeah, the governor has been very clear that they're very interested in shutting down Indian Point. The thing that we have seen is we've not seen anyone come out and say they want to replace or shut down Indian Point without replacement power.
No.
In our view, we're agnostic in who's on the grid and how they're on the grid. What's important to us is that we're reliable, and we've been we've testified in front of Senator Maziar's hearing on our view on Indian Point. It's the resource. You can't maintain a reliable grid if you shut it down without adequately replacing it, and I don't think the governor's office has ever said they intend to do that.
No, but he just recently signed this new power plant siting law. We hadn't actually had one for 8 years.
Yep.
Is your expectation that that is actually going to bring new energy sources online in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, one of the great and great story of investment in New York has been in the energy industry, and I will say competitive markets, despite not having that regulatory certainty, has brought in almost $10 billion of investment the last 10 years. And so we've seen 8,000 megawatts added in and around the city the last 10 years. So we've seen that growth. Having regulatory certainty is going to certainly make that more, hopefully more streamlined. And where you're really going to see that are the wind developers. A lot of them aren't large-scale, sophisticated utilities. They're developers that build wind farms and then sell them and flip them like some people do homes.
Right.
So having a desk and a process they can follow is going to help us bring in more renewables, and I think that's great for the state. When you bring in power from these larger generator companies, they were able to work their way through the system, but I think Article 10 was very needed. It sends a strong message from the governor's office that regulatory certainty is something that we're starting to get in New York, and that's going to help.
Well, and also helps with his push for jobs and economic development, because nobody wants to locate in a place where A, power is expensive, and B, you don't know if you flip the switch, the lights are actually going to come on.
That's right. Energy is one of the core functions of driving the economy, and we are fortunate to have a very robust system, very sophisticated markets, and I think the more that we can continue to provide that certainty, the better off that New York's going to be, and we're becoming more competitive.
What is the timeline on this particular project?
We're doing some site survey stuff now, and we expect to be up and running in 36 months.
Wow, that is quick.
Well, got to keep it moving.
Well, we will indeed check back with you. I want to thank you in the meantime, Tom, for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
I love energy. It's always so fun to talk.
It is more interesting than some of the others.
Indeed.
All right.